evening and welcome to tonight's event, the Faraday Effect. My name is Marieta Evans. Thank you for joining me. We are going to go on a journey of discovery to learn more about the maritime heritage of Trinity Buoy Wharf and Michael Faraday and the Michael Faraday Effect Museum with the two artists who curated it and who are here with us and with me tonight, Cara Flowers and Ana Ospina Cara. Ana, good evening.
Hello. Good evening.
This event is part of London's Lost Village, a project funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund and Trinity Buoy Wharf Trust, taking place as part of Totally Thames 2022. A housekeeping announcement: we have a feedback form that we'd love people watching live or watching afterwards to fill. And I believe our amazing project manager, James King, is going to pin the link to the feedback form in the comments. And it will stay there because the comments and the video, everything is going to stay on Facebook, on YouTube, forever on the Thames Festival Trust platform. So you can, if you have to leave, you can come back and watch later. Or you have to leave, you can come back and have a look at the comments later. And also, if you're watching this live, you can use the comments to leave a question for Cara and Ana, or to let us know what do you think of the themes we are discussing this evening. Or I'm also very happy when people just leave a comment to say hello and to let us know from where are you watching and why are you interested in tonight's discussion. Now, our discussion is going to be guided or inspired, if you prefer, by a series of photographies of the Trinity Buoy Wharf and also Michael Faraday Effect Museum. So to get things started, let's enjoy some of the photos that we're going to see tonight, edited in a music video. Now, if you have never seen the Faraday Effect Museum, the fascinating place which tells the story of scientist Michael Faraday, and which we can now see on a screen, this is what we are going to be discussing this evening. And I'm going to show you a couple more photos just so you have an idea of what the place looks like at Trinity Buoy Wharf. Before we get into the history of the museum and the history of Trinity Buoy Wharf, I think now is time to properly introduce the curators of the, I don't know what's the right name to call it, the Faraday Effect Museum, the Faraday Museum. Cara, Ana, who wants to begin? Who wants to go first? I'm going to go with Cara because she was the first to join me backstage. So, Cara, first of all, correct me, how should I be calling the place? The Faraday Effect, the Faraday Museum?
We've called it all sorts of things. We call it the Shed. We call it the smallest museum in London. It's the Faraday Effect. I mean, it is a mini museum, so I think the Faraday Effect Museum.
The Faraday Effect Museum. Cara, could you introduce yourself to the audience? Who are you? What do you do? And from where are you joining us this evening?
So I'm speaking from Lewes, which is near Brighton on the south coast. And so my name's Cara Flowers. I was Cara Flynn when I made the exhibition. So that's probably that name is kind of floating around on the internet. And I'm an artist. I also run a disability arts organisation based in Surrey at the moment. So I've worked on lots of public art commissions. And this was our first project. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment.
Anna?
Hi, I'm Anna, and I'm joining you from West Cork in the Republic of Ireland. I am a creative producer and project manager, working across the fields of creativity, culture, and sustainability. The common thread that runs through all my work is a fascination with people, places, and stories. I'm passionate about exploring how people can engage with the environments they inhabit, both man-made and natural, and how the narratives we weave can transform our experience and enjoyment of these places. The main thing that I'm currently involved with is trying to establish a Centre for Sustainability and Climate Action in West Cork.
Thank you very much, Anna. One thing I have to explain for people watching this evening who perhaps has not watched one of those events I sometimes I'm very happy to be asked to host for the Thames Festival Trust, is that I'm not only hosting this, but I'm self-producing the feed. So if you notice that I'm looking to the screen, I'm pulling funny faces, it's because I need to click a lot of buttons at the same time that I'm talking. So I apologize for that. The other thing is that's not my usual background. This is not where I live. Otherwise, it would be very sad because it looks like a prison. I'm at a hotel because I'm away at a business trip. So if for some reason the internet crashes and we lose connection, which I hope it doesn't happen, but could happen because this is not my normal connection, don't go away. Stay tuned. Keep an eye on the Thames Festival Trust, because if that happens, I could create a new streaming, and Cara, Ana, and I would be back in just 5 to 10 minutes. Hope doesn't happen, but just so you know that the show will go on even if we lost connection for a few minutes. Now, to tell the story of Michael Faraday and the Faraday Effect Museum, we need to also have a look at the maritime history of Trinity Buoy Wharf, because they are so connected. So let me tell you a bit about it. First of all, this is what Trinity Buoy Wharf looks like today. It's now a creative and culture and educational site. And for those who are not very familiar with the area, because we may have people watching from all areas of London tonight or from England later on, this is where the Trinity Buoy Wharf is, between more or less somewhere between the Royal Docks and the area that now we know as Canary Wharf. And for maritime history nerds like myself, the history of the place is fascinating because, for example, for nearly 200 years, this land was used as lightboat dock, buoy storage facility, and maintenance depot, as well as being used for testing new lighthouse technologies. And we can see, one thing I have realized looking at these photos is how huge buoys are. I never thought how huge they actually are. And the other thing that is very magical about Trinity Buoy Wharf is that it is also the place where we can find London's only lighthouse. It was built between 1864, 1866, and it was not a real lighthouse to direct the many ships that we did have coming in and out of the docks at the time, but it was used as a testing venue for new types of lamps and lighthouse technology. And I love this photo because it's like a school for people who wants to learn how to use a lighthouse, and we can see these guys attending a lesson on how to operate the lamp inside the lighthouse. Now, as you may say, my fabulous colleagues at Thames Festival Trust and the Trinity Buoy Wharf Trust have very kindly sent me a lot of photos of Trinity Buoy Wharf for tonight's event. So I thought that besides showing some of them to you while we talk about them, I could put some of these in another music video. Trinity Buoy Wharf was also the place where scientist Michael Faraday carried out some of his most important optical experiments. And what he was doing is he was using the lighthouse as a bit of a tech lab for his studies and inventions. And Michael Faraday is huge news because we are talking about the man who invented the electric motor, who discovered electromagnetism. And thanks to him, we have the technology now that made electric generators happen. So his connection with Trinity Buoy Wharf make the place still more magical and more important from a history point of view. And that takes us to our main and final destination this evening, the Faraday Effect Museum. So Ana, Cara, I don't know who wants to go first, but for those who have never been there, what is the Faraday Effect Museum, which we are seeing right now on a screen?
Well.
Anna, you have to go first now. Sorry.
Sure, yeah. So the Faraday Effect Museum is basically an old shed, which was already on the site and had been there for a very long time. And apparently it was the shed that was used to pay the dock workers from. So that would be where they'd go in to get their wages. And basically, when we were invited to carry out this commission, we were told this is the space that you have to work with. And so it was a very much a site-specific. At the time, we thought of it more of as an art installation, but obviously now it's kind of become a museum. Since then, and basically we were responding to that shed as much as we were responding to the history of the site and the story of Michael Faraday's life. So that's what we tried to do. We tried to tell the story of his life and scientific achievements through a series of objects and interpretations.
Cara, how would you describe what the Faraday Effect Museum is?
So if you imagine you're on the site of Trinity Buoy Wharf, and there's it's the size of a normal garden shed, as you can see in the photos, and there's a soundscape coming from the shed that you can hear when you're outside, and it's the sounds of kind of a dockyard with sort of crashing waves, and then it's interspersed with the sound of electrical buzzing. So that's the first thing that you encounter as you get closer, and then you walk in and you have pebbles on the floor. So it's meant as a sort of multi-sensory experience. And as you walk around the shed, you encounter different drawers that you can open. There are things on the table, depending when you're there. Depends. We've had a refurb of it quite a few times, and so if you're lucky enough to find it in a really excellent state when it's just been refurbed, then there'll be papers on the table with written letters from Faraday. So we did a lot of research into his life to sort of create these objects that respond to moments in his life.
Why you? What was your connection with the Michael Faraday story, or why were you commissioned to do this project?
Sorry,
go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I guess we already had done some work that was related to the area of physics. So when Cara and I, we met studying together at university and studying scenography, which is basically theatre design. And our final project for our degree was the theme of it was relativity, and so we were learning all about Einstein and the theory of relativity, and that was when we first.
I got a photo here. I don't know if that belongs to that project you're talking
about. Yes,
about.
it does. Yeah. So this was a project that stemmed from our final project that we did together. We didn't do together, but we both were doing our final projects to do with Einstein. So we both amassed a lot of research to do with Einstein, and we also had at that point decided to form a company together, a creative practice together called Fourth Wall Creations. So Cara and I put this together, and it was a touring installation that we took to different festivals around the UK in the summer of 2005. And while we were at one of those festivals, we met an employee of Urban Space Management, who are the people that manage Trinity Buoy Wharf. and they invited us to carry out the Faraday Commission.
Yes, to satisfy my curiosity, I know this is not what we're discussing tonight, but this is the part of the, or that was inspired by your Einstein installation, and I can see a lot of clocks and a violin. So what can I ask? Was the connection between clocks and violins with Einstein and relativity and gravity? Sorry.
He played the violin.
I didn't know that.
This installation was called Black Holes and Parasols. It was a very sort of whimsical look at his life and his discoveries. You'd go into this first, it was all in a tent, and you'd go into this first room, which was meant to be like his attic. And it had classical music playing, and everything that we were doing at that time was very multisensory and immersive. And then you would go through a black curtain at the back of the tent into the what was it? Was it called the Sands of?
I think it was the area of cosmic speculation.
That's right, yeah.
And the shifting sands of time, yeah.
Yeah, and you'd sit in deck chairs with these festoons around you, and there was ticking clocks buried in the sand, and you'd listen to headphones of Albert Einstein sort of giving one of his lectures. So it was. So all these sort of objects, they kind of seem quite random, perhaps, when you first come into them, but they've all got meaning to his life, and they all had, you could spend as long as you wanted in there reading all these labels and finding out more about his life, and it was our artistic interpretation of these ideas. So in the chest, you can see in one of the photos next to the violin, you can see some sort of white paper, and I think they might have been glow sticks, I think, perhaps, and they were photons. I think they were our artistic interpretation of photons. I think that's right. Was that right, Anna? It was a long time ago.
Yes, I think they were photon bundles.
Photon bundles, yeah. So we would take these sort of quite hard to understand scientific ideas and interpret them in kind of in artistic sort of ways.
So going back now that we have, thank you for explaining what was the connection. How do you end up being commissioned with the Faraday Effect Museum? So now that we are going to talk about the Faraday Effect Museum, I've got a bit of an idea of how we could do this. I got really nice photos that both of you have sent me of the installation. So what about we kind of take this as an opportunity to guide people on a virtual tour? So I will show photos of what you did, and then you can explain to us what's that and what is that in the shed, and why did you do that? For example, I'm very curious because I love Christmas, and to me that looks like very Christmas, very Christmassy, Christmas colorful shiny balls. So I can see on the left, or at least on my screen is the left, a sketch. I guess this is what you were drawing this as a sketch of this is how this is going to look like, and you painted those magic colorful balls hanging from the ceiling, and then you made that happen. We can see that is how it actually looks like in reality. What was that?
So they're actually what are they? Fishing floats. So you can't really tell in that photo perhaps, but they're made of glass. Okay. So they're quite kind of recognizable as sort of in real life perhaps as kind of seafaring style kind of nautical objects. We were trying to be honest.
We liked them. We liked them because they were colourful and pretty.
And then I was hoping that you could say it's because Michael loved Christmas. Was his favorite.
Well, he did do the Christmas lectures, and this was made around Christmas time, so maybe it was an influence.
That is true.
And what about that desk? I mean, is that how his real desk looked like, or is this? Let me show the photo of the desk again. If I come to the Faraday Effect and I see this, is this your interpretation of how his study would have looked like, or is this based on paintings or illustrations that you have of how his study looked like? Is this a real thing, or your interpretation of how it would have looked like?
Yeah, the whole thing is an artistic interpretation. I mean, we don't have any evidence for how his study would have looked. But I have a feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Cara, that desk was actually already in the shed.
Yeah, the chair and the desk and the
Yeah.
cabinet at the back, they were originally from the clerk that worked in the shed to pay the dockers. So these were original items that were found that were in the shed when we first got used.
So the furniture itself does have a connection to the maritime heritage of the place. This is where the guy who paid the dockers, that was his desk. Okay, fascinating. Okay, and I don't know how well we can see things here. Is this on the wall?
Yes, so this is on the right-hand wall. So they are slightly different now. So in 2020, actually, was it, or 21? Fairly recently, we did the latest refurbishment on it, and I worked with a very talented maker called Robin Crowley, who has made these because we made these 17 years ago, and they weren't in the best state, so they've been remade. I don't know if you've got a picture of the latest ones, but they are looking much sharper, and there's three of them. So these
this is a Faraday's lamp.
Yeah, so the first one is let me have it, the Faraday lamp.
Yeah, it was a lamp that he invented, which, because apparently the previous design of lamps, they would always get fogged up with soot.
Okay.
So he invented one where the air would circulate around and keep the glass clear of soot. So that was obviously a big improvement on the previous design.
And is this something that he invented whilst he was doing work at the Trinity Buoy Wharf?
I think so, yes. My memory is not 100% on that, but I think because he was doing experiments with the lighthouse lamp itself. He was doing experiments with lenses and optics, and he made quite a lot of breakthroughs while he was doing that work at Trinity Buoy Wharf. So I think he might have invented it while he was there, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
This is so this is your interpretation of electromagnetism?
Mm-hmm.
What is it, and how do you do that?
This is very much an artistic interpretation. We were quite, I know Anna in particular was quite inspired by the artist whose name has completely
Joseph Cornell.
Yes, I think that's yes. Yeah. And so I think we were kind of taking inspiration from other influences, and taking the general idea and getting a feel of his inventions, and rather than kind of trying to be the science museum and giving this is exactly what it is. We're approaching things as artists rather than as scientists.
Yeah, it was supposed to be kind of a visual interpretation of like electromagnetic induction, which is very much a key discovery behind the electric motor, which he basically was able to make happen. So it was a very, very important discovery of his.
It is. I'm very happy we're doing this, because when I was looking at all of the photos, I had so many questions just looking at the photos. What's this? What's this? And that gave me the idea of, this is how we're going to do this. I'm just going to show the photos. As a primary school child, I'm going to be asking, what's that? And you're going to satisfy my curiosity and the curiosity of those watching live. So let me remind you that if you are watching this live, you can use the comments option underneath the video on YouTube or Facebook to write a comment or a question for Cara and Anna, and I will read your comment or your question before the end of the show. And the third of these three kind of windows with lights and things inside. I'm sorry, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know how to describe this in a different way. Is this like, this is called Trinity House. So what is this?
So again, these boxes were kind of an opportunity for us to talk about his experiments and his achievements. Yeah. So this was talking about when he was appointed scientific advisor to Trinity House. So kind of, the label underneath it details kind of that period of his life and what he achieved during that time.
What do you? I guess you would have had to research and read about his life and his work. Is there any Anything in particular that surprised you when you were trying to discover who Michael Faraday was, so you could explain who he was through this installation? What surprised you the most about who he was and what he did?
Well, I found it really fascinating to learn that he actually came from a very poor working class background, and that he didn't actually have any formal education. So actually, it was interestingly, there were some parallels with Einstein. I mean, Einstein did have an education, but he was never considered to be particularly, gifted or academic or whatever. So again, they sort of had this in common, I guess. They didn't necessarily have the most promising start in life, academically speaking. But the way that Faraday started learning about science was that he became apprenticed to a bookbinder. And so he was able to read the books that he was binding sort of as he was working. And it's really incredible to think that somebody could be, he was obviously very talented, but he was also really dedicated and, hungry for knowledge. And he just found a way to access that knowledge, even against kind of all the odds of his background and everything. So I thought that's really fascinating.
And what about you, Cara? What do you remember that surprised you most, that you've any curiosity about his life and his work?
I think it's a similar thing, his background and his determination to achieve the things that he did. There's stories of him going to the Royal Institution, and who was this? Trying to look at my notes quickly. There was the scientist that he was listening to lectures at, and he wanted to become his apprentice, and he sent him letters, and he eventually got a job. So there's that kind of level of determination to achieve. Despite his lack of education and his background, I think it's
yeah,
really
and he was very unconventional. I mean, you mentioned, Cara, the Christmas lectures as well, which was, I think, he was the first person to give free scientific lectures to the public, which is a pretty amazing thing to be known for. And he just really thought that others should have the same opportunities to learn about science that he had, and he was really, really passionate about it. So it was very inspiring.
What is the challenge of, well, I got different questions about the challenges of a project like this. To do an installation in a place that itself has so much history as the Trinity Boy Wolf. I mean, are the challenges to that? Is that an exciting opportunity to be able to do something at a place that has so much history? And were you aware, or were you trying to explain both the history of Michael and the history of the place where this installation is set up?
It was really fascinating, because we didn't know anything about Michael Faraday before we started this, so it was a real opportunity to expand our knowledge of him and his life. And also we went to the Royal Institution. We spoke to people there. We really used it as a research opportunity and had a lot of fun doing that. And also about the wharf. And what I hadn't quite grasped was how much the wharf means to so many people, and how much interest there is in it. I mean, I occasionally get sent things from people that have been down to the wharf, and they've written a blog about the shed, and or the wharf in general. And it's a really special place, and I think it was really lovely to have the opportunity to spend so much time down there. We actually had a studio at the wharf for a little while as well, and it's quite a special place, and it all started from this point of being able to research it and research the history of it. So yeah, it means a lot to us, actually, that place.
And we can see with this photo, which I showed earlier when we were talking about the history of the Trinity Boy Wolf before we started talking about Michael Faraday. But just realized the most modern photo, we can really appreciate here how small the shed is. And for those who just joined, this museum, the Michael Faraday Museum at Trinity Boy Wharf, or the Faraday Effect Museum, is also known as London's smallest museum. So obviously my question to you both is, what are the challenges of designing an exhibition in such a small, limited space?
Yeah.
Well, space is the issue. I mean, there was a lot of information that we gathered, and we had to, edit it down and decide what was the most relevant and interesting, and how we could interpret that. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot going on at Trinity Boy Wharf, but somehow it kind of holds its own, and it's still there after 17 years. We've actually done was it three or four refurbishments on it. I mean, this is one of the issues with it being open to the public, is that it does suffer kind of sort of damage over time. So it does need sort of touching up here and there. So that's been the main issue with it, not so much that because it's small, but because it's open to the public. That kind of causes the most problems.
We really wanted, like when we first started out with our creative practice, we really wanted to create things that people could explore themselves, and we really believe that people learn more when they're engaging with something and they're discovering something. They feel like they've discovered it themselves. And I think Trinity Boy Wharf is like that. Trinity Boy Wharf is really kind of out of the way place, and not everybody knows it's there, and it's a bit of a hidden gem, and it takes a bit of work to get there. It's a bit of a trek, and you have to do a bit of a walk, and it's kind of difficult to get to by car. It's difficult to find, but when you find it, you feel like you've discovered this incredible secret place, and I think you guys probably have both experienced that. Going there for the first time, you're just like, wow, I can't believe this is here, and I didn't know about it. And then I think then the Faraday Effect is like a smaller version of that again. Like, oh, you've discovered the wharf, and now you've discovered the Faraday Effect, and you keep kind of zooming in, and like, even though it's very small, as you say, there's a lot of stuff in there, and there's a lot of stories in there. I mean, we've got objects like this big that have like little stories attached to them. So I think it's like an exercise in people have to slow down, and they have to really focus on what's around them, and they have to listen, and they touch things, and think about things, reflect on things. And it's often like, even though it's open to the public, in theory you could have more than one person in there, but because of the restricted size, really you only kind of want one, maybe two people in there. So it's quite a kind of an intimate, personal experience as well. I think it's kind of a nice place to go on your own and be in silence and kind of just absorb everything that's in there. And I mean, I don't know how long, what the average length of a visit is, but I imagine people could spend, quite a lot of time in there, just kind of really carefully looking at everything and exploring everything and just kind of soaking up the atmosphere. But yeah, as Cara says, the fact that it is open to the public all the time and it's not supervised means that there are some challenges in terms of like wear and tear, and we can't control if people want to take things. We can't really stop them. So unfortunately, things do kind of get a bit sort of shabby after a few years, and they need to be replaced or repaired again. But I mean, the great thing is people are using it and enjoying it, and as long as they're doing that, then I think it's all worthwhile.
And you said earlier that this is also a multisensorial exhibition. And for example, I can see a draw says childhood, another one says, the one below, philosophical miscellany. If people come into the exhibition, into the shed, can they open? Is there anything that them, for example, if they open the one that says childhood, are they going to find information about his childhood? Or,
that's exactly what happens. So, I mean, when we first made it in 2005, everything was openable. You could open the drawers and you could literally touch the things in there. You could open the cabinet, touch the things in there. And over time, we've had to adapt slightly just to give it a little bit more longevity. So for the latest refurbishment, when you open the drawer, you can still see what the object's inside, and there's a piece of perspex over it, just to, just to give it a little bit more protection, which is not, we always said that we want people to touch everything, but, I think there's some unfortunate limitations to that. But, things are screwed down, things are glued down. We've got a cat in the basket there that's got a big nail through it, even though that has been stolen quite a few times. Not a real cat, I have to say. And we've got lots of frogs in there as well. So there was...
tell me about the objects in this photo.
Anna, you say about the frogs.
Okay. Okay, so one of the little fascinating tidbits of information that we found when we were researching Faraday was that he was doing experiments with electricity, and one of the experiments that he did was he would run an electrical current through severed frogs' legs and make them jump. Yeah, make them look like they were alive and jumping. And apparently this was part of the inspiration for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And of course, Frankenstein's monster is brought to life with a current of electricity running through this kind of dead body. So there you go. Another interesting fact.
So we've tried to have a little bit of humour within this installation. So we've hidden frogs in little places around, which I think there's probably about 7 frogs dotted around the shed, which you've got to kind of spot. So we've tried to keep it quite light and comical and accessible playful, as accessible to as many people as possible, children, adults, and so that was our approach.
And okay, talk me through the objects in this photo. There's a map. There is a little ship in a bottle. Books. Are these books that are books that he liked to read, that were part of his library?
No, these books are just there to kind of create more of the atmosphere of the study, and they're books that, again, he was apprenticed to a bookbinder, so books were obviously very important in his life. We just went, basically most of the objects in the installation are secondhand, antique objects that we sourced locally. I think we got most of them down in Greenwich, actually. And we just kind of used them to furnish the space and make it feel kind of lived in and used. And then obviously the ship and the bottle as well is a nice kind of maritime object. But the map on the wall, it does have significance, and I think it was to do with one of the other lighthouses maybe that he worked with. I did see something when I was doing my brushing up for this interview. I did see something about the Kent Foreshore Lighthouse, and I can't remember what it was in relation to, but there's definitely some significance to that, because that map is a map of Kent. Okay. So that's all I can tell you about that. If you want to find out more, you'll have to do your own research.
And there's the cat.
Yep. I mean, what's the story of the cat? Why did you? Because I got this photo from you. Why did you send me a photo of a cat?
Oh well, I think we're at a nautical shop in in Greenwich, and we just felt like the shed needed a cat, and it kind of adds wherever you have a cat, always it adds a sense of home, doesn't it? And
and a bit of life, because it is very lifelike, and people often ask us if it's real.
I thought it was real. I thought you had a cat that living, because Michael Faraday would have had a cat.
I think
it's also very tactile. It's actually very soft and lovely to stroke as well.
A ship's cat.
Yeah, ship's cat, exactly. It's a common symbol. Yeah.
What did you enjoy the most about working on this project?
It was our first paid commission after university and as a newly formed company. So we were obviously very keen to make it the best we could do. And I think it was a real adventure, because at the time we were living in West Wales. And so we were invited down to London, and we had I think it was a week or 2 weeks to make it. And Trinity Boy put us up because we weren't paid that much. Put us up in
accommodation.
And we were put up in one of the containers. They've got Container City on Trinity Boy Wharf, which is office building made up of containers put on top of each other.
Shipping containers.
Shipping containers. And so we camped out in one of those on the floor in an empty one for was it 2? I can't remember how long it took us to make
2 weeks. Yeah.
And it was just a real adventure, and we got to know everyone at the wharf. We were there every day, morning and night, making the shed. And it was just a really lovely start to the company and the projects that followed on from that. And it really allowed us to to expand on the ideas that we were founding this company on learning methods, installations, immersive environments. So that's what I was enjoying a lot.
Yeah, and it was also, as you mentioned earlier, Cara, the research side of it. I think it was really exciting for us to be asked to research something and to kind of, I suppose it's like a problem solving thing. It's like, how do we tell this story? That's part of what I like about the design process is, how do we tell this story in a really engaging way that's accessible and exciting? And how do we also make something that's, that we can leave up in the public space and that it can withstand the kind of attention that it's going to get, and just the challenge of like learning about, because neither of us are scientists, so the challenge of learning, trying to understand and interpret and then tell that story again to the public was it was really enjoyable.
And if based on what you remember, by the way, our friends from Brighton Digital Media are watching and they say hello, and I think that means they are enjoying this conversation. Me too.
Hi.
Thank you very much. Hi. Hi, Brighton. Based on what you remember when you did your research on what he was doing at Trinity Boy Wolf, was that correct? How I explained at the beginning that he was using the lighthouse as a tech lab for his optic experiments. So what do you remember what he was actually doing there?
Yeah, that sounds correct to me. I mean, he was there. He was employed by Trinity House to improve lighthouses, I think, as far as I understand. So it was, the lenses, the optics, and the lamp itself.
We got a question from Neil Cole, who's watching us live. Thank you for watching, Neil. And he says, the link between art and science is often overlooked these days. It used to be intrinsic. Love to see this. Are there other ways the link between the two can be celebrated? Very interesting question.
I think it's what I really enjoy. I think Anna just touched on it, but what I really enjoy about artists working with science is that they're not scientists, and they are able to take these ideas and interpret them in a way that maybe is more accessible, potentially. I think when you're a scientist, or when you're so embedded in that world, you forget that not everyone understands things that seem every day to you. So I think when you can have someone that's outside of that world come in to kind of interpret things or to work with that, it can help to kind of bridge that gap, and that's certainly what we were trying to do with this installation.
Yeah, and I think we got really excited about physics specifically. I mean, I when I was doing my research about Einstein, I got really excited about quantum physics, and I was just like, this is the most amazing thing in the entire world. This is just fundamentally about the nature of reality, and the way that we experience the world and perception and all of that. Multiple universes and dimensions and things like that, and I just really was so excited about it, and I really wanted to share that excitement with the world, and I wanted anyone who saw our work to feel excited and inspired to go off and learn about it themselves, and so I think art is a really important, can be a really important way in for some of those less accessible theories and areas of study. And there's so much fascinating and really exciting creative work going on now around things like artificial intelligence, and there's incredible scope for artists. And I think really it's really important at the moment more than ever for artists to be exploring ideas around sustainability and climate change, because those are the really pressing issues of our time, and we need people to engage with those issues. We can't have people ignoring things and denying that things are happening and not taking action. So I think it's really important for artists to get involved with and engage with science and try and communicate those ideas to as many people as possible.
I think it's actually what you talked about now, using art and science, but art it's another way of reminding people about the threats that the planet is and the nature is facing with climate change. I think that's perhaps connected to some of other projects you have worked with, which I have photos of. And seeing that we have time, I'm gonna put on a screen so we can talk about it a bit. Since we are getting to the end of the Faraday Effect discussion, if the internet is still working, but if this crashed and stopped, I think I won't restart it, because I think we have mostly covered everything about Michael Faraday. But since we have time, and you just mentioned using art as another way of highlighting climate change problems, nature, sustainability, I've got some beautiful photos of a project that you did. Well, two projects actually. This is something about edible spaces.
Yeah, this is a picture from my master's project, which I finished back in 2008, and it's called Emotional Landscapes and the Edible City. So I decided to base it at Trinity Buoy Wharf because I was already doing work there and I was really interested in the site, and obviously I'd been doing some research into the history as well, through the Michael Faraday project. And basically I decided to focus on the idea of, so as I said before, my work is all about people and places. And one of the things I became really interested in was, in the future, food security. And the problem with London is, in many ways, it's a bit of a food desert. We don't have any food growing in the city. And, all our food has to be brought in from outside. So my proposal was, well, what if we brought food growing back into the city? And I was looking at examples like Havana in Cuba, and how due to the trade embargo, they had to bring food growing back into the city, and how that completely transformed the urban environment. And my proposals were also connected to the history of the wharf as a kind of a gateway for the importation of exotic plants and foodstuffs from other countries, things like coffee and tea and bananas and things like that. So I was kind of designing a planting scheme as well that was inspired by the history of trade and the shipping industry. So yeah, that's what those pictures are about.
I was researching for this event. First of all, I felt really bad because I know of Trinity Buoy Wharf. I know what it is. I have a lot of connections with people working there, or some of the history talks that I have done or hosted or done some research for have some links to Trinity Buoy Wharf. But I had never done actually anything about Trinity Buoy Wharf, so I had actually not really read and researched what the place was and what was the place used for. So first of all, I felt very guilty I hadn't done that, even if I call myself somebody who likes a history of the docks. And second, I was so surprised about how important the place was. And for 200 years, there were like hundreds of people working there, what they did. Do you have this feeling that not a lot of people know enough about the history of a place that played such an important role in the London maritime heritage?
Absolutely, yeah. I think, to think that without the docks, we wouldn't have things like tea and coffee. I mean, just something as basic as that, and bananas and chocolate and all of this stuff that we now completely take for granted, that we can have these things whenever we like, any time of the year. But if it wasn't for the docks and for the history of shipping, the shipping industry, we wouldn't have any of that stuff. And it really did shape London. It really did make London the city that it is today. So yeah, I absolutely think everyone should be more aware of that history.
Cara, what has stayed with you about the history of the place?
I think how much people feel about it. It's really loved. Trinity Buoy Wharf means a lot to a lot of people, and I mean, I think from you doing these conversations and the amount of people that have engaged with them, I think it just goes to show how important this place is and still is to the people that live there, that are people that are interested in the history of maritime history, or the docks. Yeah, it's an important place.
And
it's also a place where you can go and you feel like you're back in the time. I mean, I think that photograph of the lighthouses is a really good way of showing that. It's like when you step into Trinity Buoy Wharf, you do feel a bit like you've stepped back in time. Obviously, now there's a lot more modern structures there, and it's more of a mishmash of modern and old. But like, you know, there's just, I feel like you can really just feel the history. You know, the beautiful structures, the built environment is just incredible. It's so well preserved, and that's partly because, you know, it sat empty for, I think, about 10 or 20 years. I can't remember, prior to urban space management taking it over. So basically it was preserved. It was kind of frozen in time, and wasn't developed and wasn't touched. And I think it's fantastic that, you know, urban space have taken it over and conserved it and looked after it and restored it, and those incredible historic structures are now there for everybody to enjoy, hopefully in perpetuity.
I just can't get over how huge the boys are. It's one of the things I've learned.
It could be
like
bigger than the shed.
Yeah,
I think,
and
okay,
there's
so
a real
that is your next
quality
challenge. You have to do an exhibition, a pop-up museum inside one of the boys.
Oh yes, please. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, they're really fascinating objects. They're very sculptural.
Yeah, beautiful.
Do you have the feeling that Michael Faraday is known enough, considering everything he did and achieved? Because he's obviously very big, but he's not as a household name. Like everybody knows. You ask people, tell me a scientist, you know, they will say Einstein. Is Michael Faraday a household name, like somebody who is really widely known, considering everything he invented that we couldn't live today without?
Definitely not. He definitely should be at least as famous as Einstein. And I think maybe it's because he's from the UK, and, you know, I guess Einstein lived in America for a lot of his life, so he became more of a celebrity. And I think, you know, we didn't really have celebrity scientists until fairly recently, you know. So I think someone needs to take on that PR job and give Michael Faraday the marketing campaign that he deserves, because he really was an incredibly important person in, you know, the history of modern civilization. So
What about you, Cara? What's your feeling about it?
Well, I mean, going from my own experience, I knew who Michael Faraday was, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you what he invented, you know, prior to this project. So I think that, you know, that's quite telling. So, you know, I'm sure that's the same as many other people.
Well, I think your shed was already an amazing PR activity. And what has been the response to it now that's been going for a few years? Do you feel it was a success? Do you feel like people engage with the place? Have you got feedback from people who go to Trinity Buoy Wharf? What do people think about it?
Yeah, it's sweet. I mean, it appears in kind of secret things to do in London, and, you know, blogs like that, and it's appeared in a few books. And yeah, it just sort of it keeps popping up in places. I think I mentioned this earlier, and we'll find something on the internet, and someone's taken some really lovely photos, because it's really hard to photograph. So it's really nice to see someone's managed it.
I think the last email I got was from someone who was, I think, a scientist, and was looking for a way to demonstrate what a Faraday cage is. And she was asking if we had created a Faraday cage, and I had to tell her, sorry, we did look into it, but it was too technically challenging. We decided not to do it. But you know, there are still, like, every now and then somebody will, as Cara says, get in touch and sort of say that they've seen it or have questions about it. And I mean, it's never going to be, I don't think it's ever going to be world famous, but as Cara said, you know, it's one of those hidden gems. It's one of those secret things. And I actually really like the idea that people kind of find it by accident, and then they sort of tell their friends about it. And, you know, it's something that you only know about because somebody's told you about it. And there's something kind of nice about that. And I don't think it could really handle tens of thousands of visitors anyway. So I think by its very nature, it's only ever going to be seen by a chosen few special people. But, you know, I think
it's also got this kind of other use, which is they have lots of events at Trinity Boy Wharf, and it's kind of I think it's open during events, and it's just a place that people go in, take some selfies, have a private drinks party in there. So, I think it has lots of uses, and I think it's quite a nice thing to discover if you're at an event at Trinity Boy Wharf and you kind of stumble across it, and you've had a few drinks and what's this thing?
Well, I hope we have made it justice this evening, and I'm sure anybody watching this tonight or watching this later on the Thames Festival Trust YouTube or Facebook page will be making plans to go and visit it the following weekend. Ana Cara, thank you so very much for your time this evening. Thank you to all of you either watching now tonight live, or thanks to all of you who are going to watch this once you find it on the Thames Festival Trust Facebook and YouTube page. Remember that we have feedback form that will be eventually pinned as one of the comments. And of course, thank you very much to Thames Festival Trust, to the Trinity Boy Wharf Trust, and National Lottery Heritage for making this event possible. I hope you all enjoyed our chat. Cara, Anna, I really, really did. So thank you very much. That was really cool. And all my curiosity and my questions that I had, having looked at the photos, have been completely satisfied. You both did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you very much
for having us.
And to all of you, I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. And to say goodbye, I will leave you with the intro music video so you can enjoy it again. I'm Marieta Evans. Goodbye.